Good afternoon. The Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust will be in session for the March 6th meeting. And the first item on the agenda is the minutes, the approval of the minutes for the February 21st meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the February 21st minutes. Are there comments or questions? Hearing none, voting please. What's the other deal? Right. Minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is the consent docket. Several items.
I'd move the consent docket subject to individual consideration.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the consent docket. Are there matters to be considered individually? Hearing none, voting please. Consent docket is approved. Next item is the concurrence docket. There are three matters.
Move approval of the concurrence docket subject to individual consideration.
Have a motion and a second to approve the concurrence docket. Are there any one of those three that we need to discuss separately? Voting please. Concurrence docket is approved. Next item is item 5. These matters must be considered individually. The first one is a resolution recommending the city introduce and adopt an ordinance relating to utilities.
Marcia or Craig, could you explain that to us a little bit?
Yes. If I may, we had, I'll tell you about the operations side of why the ordinance exists, and Craig will help me with the legalities. We found last summer, as we were unfortunately having to ask people to not water, and we're shutting off water sprinklers in wherever we could, that we needed contemporary language in our ordinances to give us full force of those actions. All we want to do, of course, is when there's a serious peak demand problem to keep everyone in water, and sometimes that requires us presenting a show of control to people to help gain compliance. That would be my intent for the utility side. The laws have changed since we originally enacted these rules, and so it's been through a legal review. Now I'll turn it over to Craig to clean up anything I have confused.
The utilities has always operated under the position that the city ordinance constitute the contract between the city and its customers. However, there was not an express statement as such in the ordinances. So we added express statements in here that the ordinances are the contract, and that the customer is to comply with those ordinances as a condition of receiving water and continuing to receive water. It sets us up with some authorities and clarifies the relationship between the customer and the city with regard to such things as water use restrictions, so that they know that it is a contractual obligation of the customer as well as an obligation under the resolutions that we pass during emergency situations. And it puts us in a position of enforcing them as a contractual matter. We were trying to look at having stages of relationships with our customers should they not be in compliance with a water rationing order, such that we would have the ability to enforce it as a contractual matter and reserve the right to file citations and the like. Because what we're really looking for right now is compliance. We're not looking for a collective penalties or revenues in that way. We just want compliance.
Craig, how do you enforce it as a contractual obligation? What would the process be like?
Well, when we enforce water use restrictions, it's usually either from a complaint from a neighborhood or through the utilities department. Okay. And the employee would knock on the door and try and get the person informed of their requirement and if there's a rationing going on. If there's no one home, we normally would leave some kind of notice at the door. There are times, however, where we are in a position where the compliance is needed immediately, and the customer needs to know that they need to, that compliance may be enforced. One of the provisions in the ordinance would be that prospectively, and as they're repaired, that there be a separate cutoff for irrigation systems. Very often irrigation systems are put in without a separate cutoff valve. We really don't want to cut off domestic use when we have a water rationing, a watering ban.
Will the plumbing code then be revised to require a separate cutoff at every irrigation system? Or do we have that in the code now?
The plumbing code does not get into that issue. The ordinance would be the guiding requirement on that issue. Now, there would be required to be an education process that would go along with that, but the plumbing code is not set up for water restriction enforcement
I
purposes.
understand that, but you mentioned that there was a separate cutoff for the irrigation system.
Correct.
Is that required by any city ordinance code or whatever?
Not that I'm aware at this time. Right now, we are having irrigation systems hooked in to private service lines, the customer side of the meter, without any other control mechanism. Now, routinely, a customer would want that and have it as either part of their operating system, or if they have a timer or something of that nature, or if they needed to
Drain the
do
system and you have a
repairs.
freeze. I have one at my house.
Right. Best design practices would already have that mechanism in place, but it's not a requirement.
Do we require an installation permit before we permit the installation of sprinkler systems?
There is a plumbing permit required whenever someone taps private service. Everything on the customer side of the service line is a plumbing issue, as opposed to our side, which is a water service issue. So there is a plumbing permit authorized. I'll stop right there for now.
Well, my question is, if Pat didn't have an irrigation system at his home, if he wanted to install one, he's going to tap into his own system to let the water. Is there a permit for that?
There would be a plumbing permit required to install it.
Is there one now?
Yes.
Excuse me, that permit process doesn't require a cutoff. There's nothing in the plumbing permit that would require a cutoff.
Not in the plumbing code of which I'm aware.
But as part of this system, and the permitting will require, there'll be an inspection, I suspect, then at the end of the installation of the sprinkler system, and we'd determine that they had or had not put the cutoff in. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Under your scenario where the inspector knocks at the door and there's nobody home and leaves a sticker, you're using a quote, contractual method to enforce it. What's the difference at that point between what you're proposing and what we're doing now, issuing a citation if he doesn't do?
Well, as I said, what we're looking for is compliance. We're not really looking to ding, our primary goal is not to ding the property owner who lost track of their days or didn't properly program their irrigation system with a $200 fine. Our goal is to get them informed, get them on the same page with the rest of the cities and treating everybody equally. If you might have a repeat offender, then at some point or another, the city would be contractually able to turn off the irrigation system. We have had situations in which we have had concerns about water pressure. Particularly during the drought last year, we also had a great number of grass fires. And some of the restrictions are put in place in order to maintain the pressure to provide adequate fire protection. All right. Getting compliance to water restriction uses will aid us in being able to maintain the necessary pressures for fire protection.
I want to argue with you. I'm confused. Well, I don't know what improvement this is going to really cause in our ability to control erratic sprinkler systems? How is it better than what we're doing right now?
Should there be no one home, and should there need, let's say the inspector goes out and there's no one home, they leave a tag on the door, and they get another complaint and they go out again and there's no one home. At some point or another, the relationship, there's a contractual relationship, a right of the city to terminate the irrigation system use under the contract. That would have to be through the valve.
We have to go in and install a valve or have a valve
That
installed?
would be through the valve. We're trying to avoid other more drastic enforcement measures. We're trying to create new opportunities.
Okay. But if the irrigation system did not have a cutoff valve of its own, which I understand is not common, and I thought it was required, then how would the city cut off the irrigation system?
We would cut off all service to that site.
Okay, so
Which
the
may include-
domestic water would be cut off as
Exactly.
well? Okay.
And we're looking for a mechanism to work with the customer to avoid that.
Further, we need some language changes to make certain that we're contemporary with court procedures with regard to our rights.
The procedures in the ordinance, and the ordinance changes also provide for notice and for hearing and for reestablishing services through the utilities superintendent, so that a person who is in violation can be fully informed and be brought into alignment with the resolutions restricting water usage.
Are we winding up with two systems now?
Excuse me?
Are we winding up with two different systems? One that's in this, that you just explained, and one with the contractual fight that we were going to have earlier?
No, there would be the same
It's
system.
only one system.
One system. Now, if they were to write a citation, a criminal citation, that would be a different system. That would go through municipal courts, and there would be a hearing process for that situation. We're trying to get compliance without utilizing that system.
Where is this valve going? On private property in the right-of-way?
They're typically right next to your meter box.
So in theory, they could still be in the right-of-way.
In theory,
Yes.
my sprinkler system comes off up by the house, because that's where the backflow preventer is. It's by the house, so that you can have electric service to put a heat wrap on it so it doesn't freeze up and that kind of stuff. Who's going to find that? I mean, most of them, I'm just concerned about the logistics of doing this. From a practical standpoint, we're going to be on private property, and because I think a lot of these water systems actually tee off up by the house and not in the right-of-way. In fact, I would say most of them, if they tee off in the right-of-way, it's because they've got a separate meter, I would guess. If they don't have a separate meter, then they're going to tee off by the house. And I mean, how are you going to find those? Do we have the legal authority to go on private property and turn that valve off? I'm just questioning some of these issues. I think we've got.
We have procedural. We have a lot of.
I'm sorry?
We have a lot of procedural work to do.
Further questions? Do you have a motion?
Move approval.
Do we have a second?
You know, maybe I think I'd maybe ask for a meeting deferral on this to come back and draw up some of those procedural issues that are out there and further look at this issue before we go forward. I really understand what they're trying to do, and I believe the legal aspects of it is very important, but the practical aspects of the meter, I think we need to think through a little bit more as we go forward. So I'm not opposed to the overall context of the ordinance, what we're trying to approve, but I am a little concerned about the practical application of the valve.
Okay. Well, the motion fails for lack of a second, and under
But I'd make a motion that would defer this till the next meeting.
under our rules, they can do exactly what you said.
So we don't have to vote on it?
We don't have to do anything. It failed for lack of a second, and you understand the instructions. We'll just do it that way. The next matter is item 5B, which is entering the executive session. Do we need executive session? So we need a motion to strike that.
I mean, I think we can give there's some filings, you can probably give a 2-minute update, Craig, on the filings that have occurred in the last week or 10 days.
Since our last meeting, the Oklahoma Supreme Court has accepted original jurisdiction on the state's filing of a request for McCarran adjudication. The tribes have filed a response to the state's motion to dismiss. The state is moving to dismiss the federal lawsuit on the grounds that it fails to state a claim upon which we believe can be granted. And the tribes on Friday filed a response to that pleading. Today, we're filing a status conference report on mediation, just stating what mediation dates had been held, and that mediation, no current additional mediation dates have been set at this time. The next filing will probably be in the Oklahoma Supreme Court, a response to the state brief that is pending on the procedures for the McCarran adjudication.
Okay.
Has anybody made an estimate of how long here it's an extraordinary long time in the States?
We anticipate that the state's next briefing will outline the process for the McCarran adjudication for the Supreme Court to consider. And when we have a hearing on that issue, the Supreme Court will likely set out an order which will set forth those procedures. The state has already sent, as you can see in a handout that's before you, a letter to existing permit holders to provide them information with regard to the filing of the adjudication request from the Oklahoma Supreme Court. In many of the other jurisdictions where adjudications take a long time, there's a combination of issues and factors which impact that timing, some of which are political, some are legal, and some are appeals that are pending, and many of them are related to a deficiency of water, that there's been more permit or more requests for use of water than is available in the individual basin, which is not currently the problem in the basin in the subject of this particular adjudication.
I mean, I think there's an additional factor in this litigation, because most of the litigation that you can review that happened before did not involve tribes that have the kind of legal status that the 5 tribes do here. Their sovereignty comes in varying degrees in tribal law, and the 5 tribes in Oklahoma are remarkably different in some ways than the tribes that some of these previous adjudications have been. So this, I suspect, we're talking a long time. A lot of appealable issues that may go back and forth from the Oklahoma Supreme Court to the U.S. Supreme Court even over issues.
I think that the Supreme Court, by taking original jurisdiction, is helping the process by cutting out some of the more lower-level appeals processes.
Next item is item 6, items from trustees. Anyone? Jim? Carl? No items from trustees. The next matter is a general manager report. It's a capital improvement program presentation for the water system for the 5 years fiscal 13 through 17.
Mr. Chairman, we, of course, expect to bring this program back to you for your consideration formally, hopefully soon. But we wanted to visit with you today about changes we're suggesting in the 5-year program 2013 through 2017, reflecting the experiences that we had in the summer of 2011, what we're doing to take corrective action for customers that, with regard to system shortfalls. Mr. Samandi has a presentation for you about the changes that have been made and the concept that's recommended.
Hello, trustees and chairman, and I'm here today to give you a presentation on the next 5-year CIP for the Utilities Department from 2013 to 2017. When we put our CIP together, the bottom line for us is to make sure that our customers are getting reliable water, reliable service, and with the right quality. The first part of this presentation deals with the water capital improvement plan, and the next part would be the wastewater capital plan. This particular slide is just an information slide, shows the extent of our distribution system in Oklahoma City and the lakes in Oklahoma City and the treatment plants that are located in Oklahoma City. The challenges that we have on the water system essentially boils down to three different categories. We want to make sure that we have adequate pressure and flow to all of our customers, and we have system strengthening just in case of failure that happens, that we can be back on service, providing the service that we need to provide. And then also be in a position to respond to growth within our community. The basis for all of those decision-making process is based on the water master plan that we conducted in 2003 and the regional raw water study that was completed 2 or 3 years ago. And also a continuous assessment of what needs to be replaced in neighborhoods in town by doing that assessment in-house. In terms of water challenges, this is a slide I brought in from the last presentation that we made on CIP. There's essentially, we have pressure issues in the northeast part of town, northwest, and essentially west of the Oklahoma City area. On the northeast part, we've taken measures since last summer to carve out 2 small pressure zones in those areas, and contracts are in progress now to install a small booster station to remedy the pressure issues that they had before. And on the west side of town, northwest side of town, we're adding another pump to the booster station 18 on Morgan Road. And we're also in this CIP going to deal with the completion of the westward extension of water lines all the way to the west of town. And this slide is a slide that I put together from the Water Master Plan that shows essentially what the Water Master Plan predicted where the growth will be. The stuff in red is a projected growth area. Since the master plan is conducted, we've seen a lot more growth on the northwestern part of town, and so we need to be kind of ready for that stuff and make sure that we respond to those issues. Some of the changes we've made on the 5-year CIP, because of the drought that we had last time, we realized that we need to make sure that Overholser treatment plant is actually is operating and reliably can provide that additional service and provide the water to our distribution system. We also changed some of the timelines for completion of some of the projects to the west of town, and that's it's nothing really new because it was within our 20-year CIP program. We just brought in those projects a little bit earlier so we can begin funding and doing the engineering and begin the construction of those projects. On Overholser treatment plant, it's a very important treatment plant for us. So we've added some money for additional reliability issues and making sure that it can actually function like we need it to have function.
At the Overholser treatment plant, now, are we facing the problem of it being an old plant and we have to modify it? We'll be better off just scraping it off the ground and building new?
We've looked at that before, and the master plan looked at totally scrapping the whole thing and actually building another plant. The cost for all of that stuff was a substantial amount of money. So what we're hoping to accomplish is to decide on which improvements we want to make so that this thing is reliable for when we need it. The master plan also recommended to actually do away with the Overholser water treatment plant. But it's going to take us a little time to make sure we have enough capacity at Hefner and more reliability within the system that we can, at that time, we can come back and actually decommission the plant. So we're hoping to accomplish the reliability with less amount of money that the master plan had called for.
But you have a definite time in mind
Yes.
where that plant will no longer be required?
That's correct. The master plan suggested that we need to make sure that the Hefner water treatment plant is actually producing closer to about 150 million gallons a day. That would be a good time to start decommissioning the facility. We're making additional changes. Hopefully, we can arrive at that a little earlier, but that's the goal.
The current work at the Hefner plant, will that bring it up to 150 million gallons a day?
No. The current work is going to take us to 100 million gallons, but within the CIP plan, we plan to get it to about 150 MGD by the end of this 2017. We've made a lot of design design ideas in the current expansion that allows us a lot easier to get to 150 million gallons a day. The CIP for the water side for the 5-year plan is about $488 million, a little less than $100 million a year. To delve into the CIP is made up essentially 5 categories on the water side: neighborhood replacement, transmission mains, and storage facilities and pumping, and then water treatment plant improvements, and a big one would be the raw water supply issues. This particular slide shows in blue where we have been and will be in terms of the major transmission system. And what you see in blue, the last part of it next to the airport, is the project that we hope to be awarding before this fiscal year is over. It's currently in the bidding process. And then what you see in black and red is what we have included in the CIP to complete the westward extension of water from Draper out to the west. In addition, you see 3 different little squares, green squares, that shows the improvements that need to be done, an additional pumping station that we plan to put in just south of the airport. I'm going to go back to that for a second. Also, you'll see in blue on Douglas Boulevard, this is a project that in the previous CIP presentation we said we're going to replace an old existing pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe. I'm happy to report that that project is almost over, and the replacement is done, and the new line is in service. Also, we said we were going to do a project from Hefner to the east along Hefner. That project has been bid and has been awarded, and the contract will be, has started. So we're hoping to finish that part within the next year or so. The first phase of extension from Hefner plant to the west, as you recall, a couple of years ago we had a big event. The 36 concrete line blew up, and we didn't have enough reliability of the pipe. So this particular project is almost finished up. Will be in service in a couple of months, and it provides a greater degree of reliability and capacity to send water when the expansion is finished at the Hefner plant. If you look at this pie chart, the projects that we're doing, the distribution of money, the 45% of that is about raw water supply, and about 29% on the treatment side, and a smaller percentage on distribution and the transmission and the pumping that we'll have to do. On the neighborhood replacement, we plan to do about 9.5 miles a year, about $25 million, $5 million a year, roughly. On the transmission mains, this is the one that I was just talking about earlier. On this slide, we're looking at the black lines and the red lines, somewhere around $45 million to complete the extension. On the water storage and pumping, we're building a new booster station, 25, and a 5 million gallon storage tank just south of the airport. And then also within the CIP, we'll have improvements for booster station 9 and 14 to make sure all of that water can go to the west, about $47 million. Water treatment plant improvements, as I said earlier, we're going to spend some money at overhaul to make sure that it's improved, its reliability, and also make additional improvement at Hefner so that we can get to 150 MGD. Those improvements include low lift pump station improvements, surge protection, additional ozone, and additional pumpage at the high service pump station, and build another clear well. It's really important to have enough storage within the system to meet the peak demands in the summertime. On the Draper side, we're going to add another auxiliary high service pump station to augment the existing one and deal with the sludge handling problems at Draper, and then improve on the low lift pump station. The low lift pump station is getting pretty old. It's from the original construction, I believe. But so those are the main emphasis of the CIP on the water treatment stuff. About $141 million. The other part of this CIP, which is a big part of this CIP, is the raw water supply. Bringing water, additional water from the Kiamichi River Basin toward Oklahoma City. We have already started our engineering contract with CDM as a system engineer for the project. We're halfway through. We're hoping that the complete plan can be delineated by the end of the summer, when the report is proposed to be completed. And then deal with the construction of the second Atoka pipeline from Atoka to Oklahoma City. For us, this is really a community partnership project, and it's probably the most important project on our radar here. We have started the environmental study. We're hoping the first phase of that environmental study will be completed here shortly. And within this 5-year CIP, we'll begin the engineering on the construction of the second Atoka pipeline and the start construction, at least the first phase of it within this CIP, if everything goes well with the other issues. The other big project on the raw water supply is the evaluation of connecting the Draper system to the North Canadian system, or the southeastern system to the North Canadian. So this project should be finished up hopefully within the next few months, and we hope to begin the first phase of construction of linkage of the two systems within this 5-year CIP.
No.
So, as I said earlier, this is about $488 million, I think the program is. On the wastewater side...
Sam, before you go to wastewater, let me ask a question, if I could, on the rehabilitation of neighborhood water mains. How will you select which neighborhood to replace? Will it be a matter of trouble calls and reports?
Exactly. The way we select those things is that we have a system where we have access to all of the data on water main breaks. And we analyze that every 6 months so that we can make sure our priorities are correct in terms of which neighborhood we need to go and fix. And usually our criteria is 5 breaks per mile per year. So based on that, we can establish which ones are the more urgent ones to take care of. Like this year, we had a lot of main break projects because drought and the higher pressures caused a lot of breaks down south part of town. So we're using that data, we prioritize which neighborhoods need to have replacement.
Okay, thank you.
On the wastewater side, really we haven't made any major changes at all to our previous 5-year plan. This particular slide is just for information only. It shows all the sewer drainage basins that feed into the 4 wastewater treatment plants that we have. 2 located north, Deer and Chisholm Creek wastewater treatment plant, and the North Canadian on the northeast part of town, and the South Canadian down south. On the wastewater side, the challenges is that we need to make sure that all of our collection system and the pumping station have sufficient capacity to collect and transmit the flow, and making sure that the system is strengthened enough so that we can deal with wet weather conditions and minimize overflows, and also be in a position to make sure that we can respond to growth in our community. The basis of analysis for all of this stuff is the wastewater master plan conducted in 2009 and the response to the EPA wastewater information request that came to us in 2008. and the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality's consent order that we are currently under. I'm happy to report that most of the items that were requested or were identified on the consent order have already been done or in the process of being completed. On the overview of the wastewater CIP, it's essentially 4 different categories. Sewer main replacement and rehab within the neighborhoods, construction of relief lanes, and improvement to the lift stations, and additional improvements of the wastewater treatment plants. The changes we made from the previous 5-year CIP, very minor. We increased the amount of money that we have for the replacement of neighborhood projects. And there was another project. It was a replacement of the rotating biological compactor at the Deer Creek wastewater treatment plant. That project was slated to be done a little bit later, but the compactor has a lot of mechanical problems, and parts are not found for these things. That kind of a system is going out of business. So we're replacing all of that stuff, or proposing to replace all of that stuff. The CIP, as I said, the money didn't change really much at all. It's still close to about $164 million, somewhere a little bit more than $30 million per year. This particular slide shows the major relief lines that we've done. They're shown in green. And the red and black are the areas that we intend to install relief lanes within the next 5 years. If you look at this pie chart, most of the emphasis you'll see is on the treatment side, treatment plant, and construction of major relief lines. And a good percentage is given to the collector mains and pumping on this CIP. We plan to replace about 12 miles a year, or rehab 12 miles a year of the neighborhood areas. And we're conducting additional inflow and infiltration studies to identify more areas that need to be attended to. And that's about $31 million. On the relief mains, we plan to be essentially in all the sewer basins in Oklahoma City, but primarily in the North Canadian system and South Canadian system, about $41.4 million worth of improvements. These are again, it's the same diagram we had before. The red ones are the ones, and the black ones are the ones that we plan to do in the next 5 years. A major part of the CIP is the lift station improvement. This is the Richer Pump Station. At the bottom of this picture, you'll see the Richer Pump Station itself. In the previous 5-year CIP, we said that we're going to do a lot of improvement to the pump station, and we had a major flooding in that area. Happy to report that project is underway, and hopefully will be finished up this year. But this particular CIP deals with the lagoons that are located to the north of the pump station. Plan to replace the pumps at the lagoons and install emergency generators for the station itself. And additional money for improving the existing pump stations. About $13 million all in there. On the plant side, if our agreement with Edmond is concluded, we plan to expand the plant to about 11.5 MMGD from 10 that it is now. And as I said earlier, on the Deer Creek, we're going to replace the RBC and various improvements at North Canadian plant. And add a grid system to South Canadian, upgrade that. And then within the CIP, we have allowed or budgeted some money for odor issues, especially around Deer Creek and Chisholm area. That's about $62.5 million worth of improvements at these facilities.
Sam, what did you say Chisholm Creek capacity is now?
The Chisholm, right now is 10. The project is almost finished, and we'll go to 11.5, hopefully, when we have the agreement with them.
Okay, and 11.5 is largest we can go with the waste load allocation.
That's correct. I have another slide. If we put the water and wastewater together, the total for the 5-year program is about $652 million. It's a substantial amount of work to be done in the next 5 years. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
I wanted to go back to the Oberholzer plant for just a second. We do intend to abandon the plant. What we found last summer is we had major failures that, for the first time, we couldn't rely on Oberholzer for backup when we needed it. So we've just sucked it up. Essentially, we're recommending that we just go ahead and make improvements despite our desire to not do it. Again, we will need the capacity. It is less expensive to make that plant work despite its age, and it is a very aged structural.
It's very, very old.
I think everyone who's worked on it the last couple of years.
If you did the Oberholzer, when you do, not if, when you do, will that allow you to defer some other construction projects?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We're moving back the Hefner expansion, pieces of the Hefner expansion in this concept, hoping that putting Oberholzer to work. We do ultimately, of course, have a net zero-sum game in the North Canadian. We know that we're using 100% of our water rights. So we're tending to push water, the North Service area, farther into the north part of this city and concentrate it more north and northwest, while we push water from Draper both to the west and south and due north. Some of it is the fit together of how the distribution system works. We haven't modeled. We believe it will work well. You get beat up in a summer like last summer, you want to make certain that you've tested it well before you commit, I guess.
When you get the 150 million gallons a day capacity at Hefner, what value or what use will the Oberholzer pumping station have at that point? Limited at best. There are some times when you have a demand in the far west. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I think by increasing the Draper production to about 125, because I think that's what the current capacity of production is at Draper, we're going to be able to actually replace a substantial amount of contribution from Oberholzer from the water from Draper. That's why we're hoping that it can be decommissioned as quickly as possible. The Oberholzer is a plant that was rated for about 25 MGD, and last year, at best, we had about 16 to 18 million gallons. We think we can monitor and better plan in terms of the use of Oberholzer, not to have the 25 MGD or 30 MGD at one time that we got out of it, by more water from Draper, because that's really the big plant in Oklahoma City and the workhorse for Oklahoma City, and allow Hefner with all of its capacity to serve the north and the northwest area of town.
I'm not sure we've yet been responsive to your question.
Okay, it's okay. That's $600 million, roughly. How much that will have to finance?
We're looking at those numbers now,
Yeah,
and we'll bring you back information about that.
sure, we can do that.
The question was the amount of financing.
Right.
About 60 to 65% of the CIP unfinanced.
Further questions? Thank you. Last item is citizens to be heard. Are there any citizens to be heard? Hearing none, we're adjourned.